He sat alone in his dressing room, the gentle hum of applause still floating through the door, yet in his heart a different kind of sound echoed, an empty, hollow ache. Just hours before, Ringo Starr had turned 85 under the soft glow of birthday candles and decades of adoring cheers, but the magic of that moment vanished the instant he read the words scrawled on the official notice from Apple Corps. The upcoming Beatles hologram world tour, an event meant to celebrate the band's golden legacy, would proceed without him. His live drumming, his unmistakable voice, even his personal reflections on air would be replaced by digital recreations, modeled from old recordings and synthesized samples. In one agonizing stroke, the only surviving Beatle discovered he was no longer a living part of the story he had helped write. He replayed the communiqué in his mind. Regrettably, for technical consistency and logistical efficiency, we must rely exclusively on holographic likenesses and archival audio sources. We deeply appreciate your contributions over the years. Contributions over the years. No mention of the nights when he collapsed on stage with fever, no nod to the countless hours spent perfecting that offbeat rhythm that became the heartbeat of songs like Ticket to Ride and Come Together. No acknowledgement of the countless times his patience held together a band whose friendship teetered on the edge of collapse. It was as though the organization, built on his legacy, had decided that Ringo was too human, too unpredictable, to be part of this grand celebration. Memories flooded back. The first time he picked up a drumstick in a factory basement, hitting a cotton bobbin mallet against a metal cabinet just to hear the echo, the spark lighting a lifetime of creativity. The raucous Hamburg nights, where the Beatles honed their sound under neon signs in the red light district, staving off exhaustion with a cocktail of coffee and adrenaline. The moment he stepped onto Abbey Road for the first time as an official Beatle, half the crowd chanting Pete forever, Ringo never. Those were the crucibles that forged the drummer who would one day anchor the most influential band in history. And yet, none of that seemed to matter now. In the eyes of the promoters and the laser-lit stages they envisioned, he was replaceable, an artifact rather than an artist. He could feel his pulse quicken, each beat a reminder of the blood, sweat, and tears that had gone into every snare hit and cymbal crash. The stage fright he conquered, the pranks his bandmates played, the near-death scares from illnesses that struck him down, they were all part of a shared saga. But here, in this sterile memo, his body of work was reduced to data points and file formats. It was a betrayal that undercut every peace and love proclamation he had made from coast to coast, every moment he had paused mid-toast to wipe away tears for the friends he'd lost. Yet as the initial shock rippled through him, another realization emerged: this wasn't just a personal slight. It was emblematic of how we treat pioneers once the world moves on to newer thrills. When fresh technologies arrive, the living architects of history risk becoming ghosts in their own story. If holograms could do the job, why pay the man who inspired the technology in the first place? And if Apple Corps accepted that logic, what would stop other institutions from drafting entire lineups of digital stand-ins for icons presumed too frail for the rigors of live performance? He knew he faced a choice. He could bow to the corporate machinery, sign the waiver they sent along with the notice, and let them paint him out of his own narrative. Or he could fight. And fighting him meant stepping out from behind the shadows of his confidences with Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison, none of whom would ever need protection from publicity again. His defiance might risk fracturing the unity of the Beatles brand, but surrendering felt like signing his own obituary. With a deep breath, he rose, every glance in his dressing room mirror a reminder that 75 years of sunlight and stadium spotlights had only polished his spirit, never dimmed it. He let his fingers trace the worn grooves in the wooden snare drum perched nearby, an old friend as reliable as the heartbeat it echoed. He remembered how music first rescued him from loneliness in a tuberculosis ward, how each drumbeat steadied him against the chaos of bombed-out Liverpool streets, how his off-kilter style turned mistake into music and gave the band its signature groove. Somewhere backstage, a stagehand knocked lightly on the door. They had come to tell him there were only 10 minutes until he had to greet the press and mingle with guests. If he walked out with the same grace he had shown through every heartbreak and reconciliation, the world would see that he understood more than he let on. But deep down, he felt the weight of every silent heartbeat that would follow him across that threshold. He straightened his collar, adjusted his cufflinks, and forced a calm expression. Inside, his mind churned with memories of John's teasing grin when they first jammed in a cramped cellar, of George's shy approval the first time he nailed a tricky fill, of Paul's cheeky thumbs up as they walked onto the Ed Sullivan stage, where 4,000 screaming girls nearly tore each other apart just to catch a glimpse of him. Ringo Starr, the boy from Madron Street, had always been the underdog, scared he'd be replaced, terrified he wasn't good enough. Yet time and again he proved he belonged, even when the odds were stacked against him. He exhaled slowly, letting the tension slide from his shoulders. The world would soon meet him with smiles and applause, oblivious to the storm raging behind those blue eyes. But storms have a way of changing landscapes, carving new paths through solid ground. And Ringo, more than anyone, understood how a single rhythm could reshape an entire song. He stepped through the velvet ropes and into a sea of cameras, microphones, and blinking lights. Reporters jostled for position, each eager to capture his every word, his every gesture. Pinned between stage pillars draped in Beatles memorabilia, he felt like a relic under glass, admired, studied, but no longer acknowledged as a living, breathing artist. Flashbulbs created a staccato rhythm that matched the drumbeats he once played, but those flashes illuminated something else, his vulnerability. Heart in his throat, he offered the practiced half-smile that generations of fans recognized. They called him the heartbeat of the Beatles, yet today, that very heartbeat seemed under threat. He raised an eyebrow at the first shouted question, "Ringo, will you support the hologram tour?" He paused, weighing loyalty against the emptiness of a rehearsed performance. He cleared his throat and let the words roll out, measured but firm. "I appreciate the creative vision behind bringing the Beatles' legacy to new audiences, but I won't sit back and watch myself erased. The soul of our music lives in the hands that played it, in the laughs we shared backstage, in the moments that no machine can replicate." Murmurs rippled through the room. Cameras clicked faster. He saw the segment producer glance at her notes, searching for the next soundbite. He squared his shoulders. This wasn't about technology overruling art, it was about respect for artistry, for humanity itself. A reporter pressed on, voice rising, "Are you threatening legal action?" He let a thin smile curl at the corners of his mouth. "If that's what it takes to protect the truth, yes. But this isn't a legal dispute alone. It's a fight for authenticity. It's my story as much as it is everyone's who's ever fallen in love with our music." He scanned the crowd, letting each electric gaze settle on him. This was more than a press conference, this was a declaration. Afterward, he retreated backstage, the buzz of questions trailing him like echoes in a hall of mirrors. His longtime assistant, Melody, met him with a sympathetic nod and a tablet brimming with fan messages. "Thousands have written in," she whispered, showing him one that read, "Ringo, you are the real deal. Don't let them turn you into pixels." Another, "We need you live on stage, not stuck in a loop of pre-recorded holograms." These voices fueled something deep inside him. They weren't asking for a reconstruction, they were demanding the living man who gave heart to his craft. In the quiet of his dressing room, he sank into a worn leather chair and watched the playback on a small monitor. His own words rang out crisp and defiant, echoing across the room. Outside, he heard the distant thrum of the tour's hologram trailer boasting sold-out shows in London, Tokyo, New York. It felt surreal that the band he co-founded was being parceled into light beams and motion capture files. Marvelous, yes, but hollow without the flesh and blood drummer who built the rhythm section from scratch. He set his jaw and picked up the phone. First call, his lawyer, Harrison Cole, who had handled everything from trademark disputes to complex recording rights. "We need to move fast," he said. "I want injunctive relief that stops them from rolling out anything until we negotiate terms. And I want protections in place that guarantee my performance, or at least my direct involvement, remains integral." Cole's voice crackled with agreement on the other end. Plans formed that would involve meeting with Apple core executives, representatives of the Lennon and Harrison estates, and the tour's technical directors. Next, he called Olivia Harrison. George's widow had always been a steadfast ally, someone who understood the fragile mix of legacy and livelihood. Olivia answered after 2 rings. He told her the news, how the global celebration of their shared history risked erasing the 2 departed friends' presence in favor of soulless simulations. "They'll be lighting up your late husband's guitar solos, but without his spirit in the room," he said, voice low. "And that's not right." Olivia's pause carried the weight of decades spent protecting George's memory. She promised her support, offering to reach out to Yoko Ono and the John Lennon estate. Together, they would form a united front, 3 voices safeguarding the essence of the Beatles against a tide of digital overreach. By late afternoon, he was back on stage for a brief soundcheck, hammering the drums with all the precision and flair that once shook stadiums. Each crash of the cymbals felt like a promise. He would fight to keep the real heartbeat alive, in gear, on stage, in flesh and blood. Fans who caught a glimpse through the backstage curtain stamped their feet and cheered, and in that roar, he heard the echo of millions who refused to accept a hollow homage. As the sun dipped below the arena facade, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Ringo Starr looked down at his hands, the ones that had held sticks and shaped a cultural revolution. No hologram, no collection of ones and zeros, could replace that human touch. He straightened, knowing tomorrow he would face another round of negotiations, more headlines, and the threat of corporate inertia. But for tonight, the real Beatle walked off stage as himself, alive, defiant, and determined to ensure the world remembered exactly who kept the beat. He gathered in a dimly lit boardroom with his closest allies, Harrison Cole, his sharp-suited lawyer, Melody, his steadfast assistant, and Maeve Johnson, a veteran music industry strategist. The long oak table was strewn with contracts, hologram design schematics, and financial projections. As Harrison sketched potential legal pathways, Maeve tapped a pen thoughtfully. "We need leverage that resonates," she said, voice low. "Not just court orders, but public sentiment. If fans rise up, Apple Corps will bend." Ringo nodded, his eyes steely. "Let's remind them whose names are on the marquee," he replied. Their strategy, a coordinated media campaign, a fan-driven petition, and an offer to collaborate on the hologram tour itself on his terms. It wasn't aggressive posturing, it was a chance to redefine respect for legacy while embracing innovation. Later that evening, Ringo sat in his home studio, thick curtains drawn against the London night. He stroked the surface of an ancient drumhead, scarred from decades of touring. Photos lined the walls: Liverpool cobblestones, Hamburg neon signs, Abbey Road crosswalk, and a recent snapshot of him hugging the granddaughter he adored. He exhaled, mindful that his fight was not only about preserving his story, but safeguarding a generational touchstone. He remembered the whispered disbelief when he first learned the tour would eclipse him. Now, he was forging a narrative where technology served humanity, not replaced it. The next morning, headlines exploded: Ringo's last stand? Beatle battles hologram injustice. He appeared on a popular talk show, greeted by a banner proclaiming the drummer's darkest hour. The host leaned in eagerly. "Ringo, the world adores you, why go head-to-head with your own legacy?" Ringo offered a measured laugh. "Legacy isn't about nostalgia. It's about truth. My friends and I wrote history together. If you play the record without the record keeper, you lose the heartbeat." He articulated his proposal: live performances augmented by holograms of John and George, while he and Paul alternated real-time appearances, ensuring an authentic, hybrid experience. The audience applauded, some on their feet. In that moment, he reclaimed the spotlight. Behind the scenes, Maeve orchestrated a viral petition entitled "Keep Ringo Alive on Stage." Within hours, hundreds of thousands signed, sharing personal stories of how Ringo's drumming shaped their lives. A teenage fan from Brazil described learning the drums by watching his videos. A veteran who survived Vietnam credited listening to "with a little help from my friends for comfort amid chaos." These testimonies were more than data points, they were emotional bullets aimed at the heart of corporate apathy. Social media hashtags trended. Major news outlets picked up the story. Ringo's stand had become a cultural flashpoint. Meanwhile, at Apple Corps headquarters, executives found themselves mired in crisis management. A department that once handled tour logistics was inundated with press inquiries and legal notices. Their original confidence gave way to defensive memos and frantic calls to PR firms. Boards were cleared, meetings delayed, and as tension mounted, a surprising truth emerged: without Ringo's endorsement, ticket pre-sales dipped. Even hardcore hologram enthusiasts hesitated to invest in a spectacle missing its original pulse. Stakeholders began whispering about negotiation terms, and for the first time, Ringo sensed the pendulum swinging in his favor. On the third day, he traveled to New York for a joint meeting with Apple Corps executives and the estates of John Lennon and George Harrison. The conference room looked more like a treaty negotiation than a music industry gathering. Portraits of the original quartet hung on the walls like silent witnesses. Representatives from legal, creative technology, and public relations assembled behind long mahogany tables. Ringo's presence was understated yet commanding. He opened with a simple request: integrate his live performances into the hologram experience, and consult him on authenticity parameters.
He emphasized that collaboration, not competition, would yield the greatest return emotionally and financially.
The room fell silent.
After hours of deliberation, the mood shifted.
A senior executive leaned forward.
"Sir, we overlooked the intangible essence you bring. The public wants the real Ringo."
They proposed a new framework, a hybrid show where Ringo performed live, bookending each set, while holographic projections of John and George appeared in between, complete with interactive segments narrated by him. Revenue-sharing terms were adjusted to acknowledge his iconic status. As drafts were redrawn and signatures placed, Ringo felt an unexpected swell of pride. He had negotiated not only for himself, but for every artist whose legacy might one day be threatened by digital mimicry. That night, he returned to his hotel suite and phoned Paul McCartney.
"Can you believe it?" he said, voice thick with emotion. Paul's laughter crackled through the line, relief palpable. "You did it, mate. Beat them at their own game."
They shared stories of the negotiation, then reminisced about their earliest days, trading quips that lightened the weight of the battle. Before hanging up, they agreed the upcoming tour would include a reunion video call at select venues, where they'd share memories live with fans, another layer of authenticity no hologram could match. As Ringo prepared to step onto the stage for his next public appearance, he reflected on the stakes of his crusade. More than a personal victory, it represented a turning point in how we honor living legends. He understood that technology offered endless possibilities, but it should amplify human artistry, not overshadow it. With every drumbeat awaiting him, he carried the promise that the true soul of music lives in the spaces between notes, in the human spirit that dares to create, connect, and resist being silenced. He awoke before dawn, restless with anticipation. The London skyline was still a shadowed silhouette when he slipped into his home studio, a hush broken only by the soft tick of a metronome. Ringo picked up his drumsticks and tapped the snare, listening for the steady heartbeat that had carried him through childhood illness, Beatlemania hysteria, and now, this defining moment. He felt the familiar comfort of the sticks against his palms, a tactile reminder that no hologram algorithm could replicate the nuance of his touch. Later that morning, he convened with the creative technology team in a converted warehouse near Shoreditch. Arrayed on tables were hologram projectors, motion capture data streams, and vintage Beatles instruments, George's Gretsch, John's Rickenbacker, Paul's Hofner bass. Ringo traced his finger along dusty guitar bodies before turning to the lead technician. "Show me how you'll blend my live beat with John and George's holograms," he said. The technician initiated a sequence. Translucent figures of John and George materialized midair, playing "Come Together" alongside a hovering virtual drum kit mapped to Ringo's live performance area. As he tapped a sample virtual drum, the sound synced instantly with his real snare through a sophisticated audio interface. He nodded, impressed by the seamless integration, but insisted on adjustments: move George's projection 2 feet higher to avoid shadows, refine John's lighting to match their Abbey Road aesthetic, and adjust the mix so his live hi-hat cut through without drowning the digital guitars. Rehearsals began that afternoon at a converted soundstage. Ringo entered under the glow of stage lights, hushed by crew as holographic John and George flickered into view. He launched into Ticket to Ride, striking a confident groove that pulsed through the massive speakers. From the control booth, he watched the holograms track his movements, their eyes following his lead. In one run-through, John's connection dropped for a split second, the illusion shattered. Ringo let the song wind down, then called out through his headset, "We need smoother transitions, no jumps. It must feel alive." Technicians scrambled to fine-tune latency buffers. By dusk, the sequence played flawlessly, and Ringo felt the exhilaration of unity, past and present converging in real time. That evening, he hosted an intimate gathering of superfans in a small studio adjacent to the main stage. Dozens of longtime devotees filed in, their faces alight with giddy curiosity. Ringo greeted each with a warm handshake, his blue eyes twinkling. When they took their seats on mismatched couches, he sat on the drum riser and spoke directly, "Tonight, you're the first to witness what we've created. Technology is powerful, but only when it's used to honor what came before. We're here to prove that the human spark still drives the music." As John and George's holograms played a short reprise of "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," the room filled with awe. Fans recorded reactions on their phones, sharing immediate posts: "Seeing Ringo and holographic George live, it's unreal.
Their voices spread like wildfire online, amplifying the message, real emotion needs a real musician. The clearance windows for the first hybrid concert opened 2 nights later in Manchester. Tickets had sold out in minutes, putting the promoters on the edge of a public relations rebound they desperately needed. Ringo arrived early to soundcheck, greeted by the thunderous roar of a crowd allowed into the empty arena for rehearsal. He climbed onto the drum riser, heart pounding louder than any amplifier. As he struck the opening beats of Don't Pass Me By, the holograms appeared, John's laser-etched silhouette, George's ghost-like figure trading solos in perfect lockstep. The crowd's impromptu cheers filled the cavernous hall, and Ringo closed his eyes, savoring the moment, history in motion. Backstage, he caught a glimpse of his reflection, a silver-haired elder with the youthful spark still glowing in his gaze. He thought of the journey, the orphan boy whose father abandoned him, the sick child wrestled back to life by doctors, the shy Liverpudlian who found himself at the Cavern Club, then Hamburg, then Abbey Road. Each trial had sculpted him into a conduit for collective joy, a beating pulse in a world hungry for harmony. Now, decades later, he was bridging epochs, ensuring that emerging audiences experienced the authentic heartbeat of the Beatles. As the final rehearsal concluded, he addressed the arena over the sound system. Tomorrow, the show is for all of us, those who were there in the 60s, those who will see us for the first time in the digital age. Let's make it a celebration of what music can do, unite, heal, inspire. Cheers exploded. Technicians fist bumped. His assistant, Melody, handed him a cup of tea, and he took a slow sip, letting the warmth anchor him. The next morning, he prepared for the press call ahead of the official launch. Reporters had plastered billboards across Manchester proclaiming Beatles live, past and present, together. Questions would come about contracts, holograms, legacy. But Ringo felt ready. He had practiced his points, yes, but more importantly, he had rehearsed his truth, that artistry transcends medium, born in human hands and hearts. He glanced at his phone, scrolling through tweets from fans who couldn't fathom a Beatle experience without Ringo behind a real drum kit. One tweet captured it perfectly: a hologram can look like George, but only Ringo can make me feel like I'm alive. He smiled, tucking the phone into his jacket pocket. Tonight, he would honor that promise. He closed the door behind him and stepped into the corridor. Stage lights glimmered at the end. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his tie, and walked toward history, 2 generations united in a single heartbeat. By the time he reached Tokyo, Ringo knew opinions had shifted. At Nippon Budokan, 10,000 fans gathered to see the man, not just a hologram. His drums rang out as John and George's holograms appeared in perfect sync, illuminating the stage with a sense of reunion. Reporters praised the show as the real deal, and ticket sales surged for Sydney and New York. He recalled Paul's thumbs up on video. Livestream numbers soared, fans from Brazil to Germany shared teary reactions, proving that authentic music must live in human hands. Backstage, Ringo sipped green tea, reflecting on how far he'd come, from a sick child finding rhythm in a basement to a world figure proving humanity still matters in performance. He thought of the boy abandoned by his father, the illness that nearly claimed him, and the drum fills that once saved him. He tapped an impromptu solo, a flourish unencoded by any digital map. That quiet beat was his signature, a reminder that while technology can replicate sight and sound, it cannot replicate soul. When the show ended, the crowd's applause thundered like a vow: the real heartbeat would always outplay any simulation. From the first cymbal crash, the synergy was electric. He kicked off I Want to Hold Your Hand with a classic 4-on-the-floor pulse, and John's Rickenbacker shimmered at the same tempo while George's riffs aligned in unison. The audience rose, swaying between the tangible and the virtual, proof that a seamless fusion could honor the past without feeling gimmicky. Midway through A Day in the Life, he held a breathless break, letting silence hang briefly before plunging into the swelling orchestral crescendo. In that instant, every attendee realized they were part of something historic, a song once recorded in fragmented studio sessions now restored to full glory. When he transitioned into Back in the USSR, he leaned into double-time fills, the stage lights flickering to accentuate the swagger. At the song's end, John and George's holograms bowed theatrically, and Ringo answered with a grin old friends could share. Cameras captured the moment, but genuine applause roared louder than any flash. By the time the set concluded with a little help from my friends, a wave crashed through the arena.
The fusion of human heartbeats and digital ghosts became a testament to creativity's enduring power. Word of mouth spread like wildfire after Manchester. Critics praised the hybrid concept as a masterstroke, calling it committed nostalgia and the future of legacy performances. Major outlets ran headlines, "The Beat Goes On, live and unfiltered." Fans shared clips and anecdotes, posting replies under hashtag Keep Ringo Alive. Skeptics admitted the human pulse was irreplaceable. On blogs and forums, debates raged. Could other acts replicate this formula? Ringo's approach became a case study in artistry. Meanwhile, his team prepared packages for Tokyo, Sydney, and New York, each with unique local touches: karaoke sections in Japan, drum tutorials in Australia, street parades in New York's East Village. Ringo reviewed each itinerary with melody aboard a private jet bound for Narita. He enjoyed scouting venues, imagining new audiences connecting to his drumming. Paul surprised him with a video cameo, sending encouragement and a reminder, "Don't overthink the fills, mate." That banter reminded him why he fought so hard, not just for recognition, but for the joy of playing drums in front of real people. As he closed his tablet, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Legacy wasn't set in stone, it was alive, adaptive, and beat by beat, still unfolding. He awoke before dawn, restless with anticipation. The London skyline was still a shadowed silhouette when he slipped into his home studio, a hush broken only by the soft tick of a metronome. Ringo picked up his drumsticks and tapped the snare, listening for the steady heartbeat that had carried him through childhood illness, Beatlemania hysteria, and now, this defining moment. He felt the familiar comfort of the sticks against his palms, a tactile reminder that no hologram algorithm could replicate the nuance of his touch. Later that morning, he convened with the creative technology team in a converted warehouse near Shoreditch. Arrayed on tables were hologram projectors, motion capture data streams, and vintage Beatles instruments: George's Gretsch, John's Rickenbacker, Paul's Hofner bass. Ringo traced his finger along dusty guitar bodies before turning to the lead technician. "Show me how you'll blend my live beat with John and George's holograms," he said. The technician initiated a sequence. Translucent figures of John and George materialized midair, playing "Come Together" alongside a hovering virtual drum kit mapped to Ringo's live performance area. As he tapped a sample virtual drum, the sound synced instantly with his real snare through a sophisticated audio interface. He nodded, impressed by the seamless integration, but insisted on adjustments: move George's projection 2 feet higher to avoid shadows, refine John's lighting to match their Abbey Road aesthetic, and adjust the mix so his live hi-hat cut through without drowning the digital guitars. Rehearsals began that afternoon at a converted soundstage. Ringo entered under the glow of stage lights, hushed by crew as holographic John and George flickered into view. He launched into Ticket to Ride, striking a confident groove that pulsed through the massive speakers. From the control booth, he watched the holograms track his movements, their eyes following his lead. In one run-through, John's connection dropped for a split second, the illusion shattered. Ringo let the song wind down, then called out through his headset, "We need smoother transitions, no jumps. It must feel alive." Technicians scrambled to fine-tune latency buffers. By dusk, the sequence played flawlessly, and Ringo felt the exhilaration of unity, past and present converging in real time. 2 weeks after the triumphant Manchester debut, he touched down in Sydney, the Opera House sails gleaming in the distance like white banners across a sea of possibility. The venue, perched on the harbour amid seagulls and soaring voices, pulsed with anticipation. Ringo stepped onto the outdoor stage, snare drum glinting in midday light, and launched into Hey Jude with heartfelt resolve. The holograms of John and George materialized against the azure sky, swirling into formation behind him as fans waved flags and sang every lyric. The energy was electric, a moment suspended between memory and innovation, and in each cymbal crash, he felt humanity's heartbeat returning. This moment proved that technology could uplift the living spirit, rather than replace it. After the show, he met with leaders of local music education charities, using the tour's momentum to launch the Ringo Starr Rhythm Foundation in Australia. He sat at a long table with passionate teachers and students, listening to stories of how drumming had transformed young lives in remote outback communities. With each handshake, he signed drum pads and offered tips on technique, inspiring the next generation of beat makers. News cameras recorded his pledge to fund scholarships and instrument donations, broadcasting his commitment far beyond the stage. Back at his hotel suite, emails from Brazil to Bangladesh flooded in, thanking him for using star power to empower underprivileged kids and ignite creative dreams. When the tour reached New York's Madison Square Garden, an air of reverence settled over the city that never sleeps. Thousands of fans spilled into the arena, clutching vinyl records and vintage posters as they waited for the hybrid experience. Ringo's entrance triggered a wave of cheers so fierce it felt like a tidal surge. He sat behind his transparent drum platform, the glow of smartphone screens rising like constellations. As he counted in Revolution, the holograms of John and George kicked in, their iconic riffs slicing through the roar. Between songs, he shared anecdotes about recording at Strawberry Field and playing gigs in local pubs before they became household names. His candid stories reminded audiences that legends once lived, laughed, and learned just like everyone else. During the tour, Ringo kept a journal on hotel stationery, notes on fan encounters, sketches of stage layouts, and fledgling ideas for new projects. He wrote about the harmony between analog and digital worlds, and how each hybrid concert became a dialogue of past and present. One entry described a hologram glitch that turned into an interactive moment. John's projection stumbled, prompting Ringo to improvise a fill that reshaped the song. The crowd cheered louder at that unplanned honesty than any polished performance. In his final entry, he mused that the experience proved technology magnified what made music human when guided by artists who refused to surrender their voices. He closed the book certain he had set a lasting precedent and inspired countless others to follow in his footsteps. As word of Ringo's triumph spread across continents, a wave of fans and artists rallied around the principle he championed, that creativity demands human connection. Social media challenged every major act to commit to live performances alongside digital enhancements, sparking debate in forums. Meanwhile, Ringo's Rhythm Foundation announced its first of grant recipients in Mexico City and Johannesburg, distributing drum kits and workshop vouchers to underserved youth. He recorded a video pledge, speaking directly to his global audience: "Music is a bridge, not a barrier. Let's build experiences that honor the past, embrace the future, and keep the human spirit at the center." That message became a mantra for a new era, proving that one man's stand could reshape industry norms and inspire a generation hungry for authenticity. As the final notes of "Here Comes the Sun" drifted across the air at New York's closing show, Ringo paused, drumsticks in hand, breathing in the ocean of faces lit by stadium lights. He raised his stick in salute to the virtual bandmates who had journeyed with him one last time. Then he tipped his head and sent the crowd into ecstasy with a thunderous final fill. Tears and cheers intermingled as fans realized they'd witnessed a living legend at the peak of his craft, proving that no algorithm can replace the warmth of presence and the electricity of improvisation. When the lights dimmed, he returned to the stage alone, placed a hand over his heart, and bowed, sealing his legacy in an unbroken rhythm that will echo for generations.